Okay, welcome everybody. It is July 19th and our last session was June 14th. And June 14th we went through quite a lot of sacred geometry. I mean, we went into quite a deep perspective in journeying into creation and consciousness. And there was a channeling involved with that. And I think the subjects that we touched upon actually were kind of deep, and some of you may have experienced in your daily lives some revisiting of past issues, traumas, challenges, stories, beliefs, inner tyrant. I know some of you have written and shared with me some of the revisiting of issues that have come up. The material we went over, of course, the sacred geometry, showing the structure and substructure to the self, and that includes such a depth. And in those foundations of structure and substructure are the patterns of our belief systems, our stories and emotions, and so on. And so, as I shared inside of there, those different layers of it, one of the purposes of seeing the vast array of structure and substructure, where you remember went over 4 states of matter: solid, liquid, gaseous, plasma, and the 4 conjectured states to add to those, which would be astral, etheric, void, and consciousness. So as these structures are being formulated, they came originally from sound, music, sound, voice, or word, and those gave rise to the formation, and I showed you some graphics, Masaru Emoto, how do you say his name? Masaru Emoto's work, it exposes very much how words create structures in water, and those structures are very similar to cymatics, and I showed you some graphics on cymatics, and all the different frequencies arrange the patterns of atoms and so on, compounds start formulating to these structure and substructure, but they all come from consciousness. And I was also showing that inside of Purusha, which is, let's say, the state of harmonized duality. So paradox is harmonized duality coming together, and inside a harmonized duality, yin finds its home in yang, yang finds its home in yin, as an example for the dualities, and so they no longer need structure because they found their home. But in separation, then the yin and the yang have all kinds of geometry, all kinds of layers and levels and stratas of interconnections between each other. So they cannot be separated forever. The pathways all lead home. So I showed the various stages of structure and substructure, right? And that was all leading to the point where Mother Earth was talking about how she's at the point now, because the consensus of consciousness is ready to move to another level, but before the tectonics can change of the paradigm, one has to release the stories, beliefs, and so on, and the emotions that create these foundational consciousness, which resonates in the structure and substructure. So we have outlaid here in the 3D exactly what is appropriate for the consensus, the consortium of all of our beings, readying to handle the stories playing out before us. As the stories play out before us, then we learn the lessons and we learn how to disentangle from the entanglement so that compassionate appreciation can allow yin and yang to find their bridges and pathways back home and come into oneness. So Mother Earth was talking about, I'm shaking all your foundations now so that you can allow to pass through the many layers, structures, and substructures of the greater array of your being and allow them to pass. Why? Why? Because if we hold on, unconsciously especially, if we hold on to the stories, the emotions, and the beliefs, then what happens is it makes it so difficult, we start shrouding ourselves in the fabric, like tulle, and I gave the example of wedding tulle. As part of that, as a metaphor of that structure and substructure, well, the more stories you write in between the layers and windings of the structure and substructure, it darkens like a dirty filter. It obscures not only your vision, but your feeling. So you feel disconnected from the most important thing about you, about each and every one of us, which is absolute unconditional love. And especially now that the fabric is shaking, the dirt is rising. The little dust clouds are abounding. And so at this time, it makes it really difficult for you to abide in centered peace. And so last month's entire lecture and channeling and healing and stuff was all about getting us to open the awareness to the expanse of your structure and substructure, how far it goes. And all the work we've been doing over the past few years about seeing the stories, the incompletely processed stories that we created in a polarized fashion when we were little kids. When we were little kids, it's only good and bad. That's polarized. Things we like and things we dislike. And so we run away from what we dislike and we try to cleave and hold on and grip to what we like. And a lot of unconscious things we have learned to, with these stories, are the emotions, and those form belief systems, and then our inner tyrant begins to work on those and keeps pressing the button on us. And so we've accumulated over time through habit and pattern just how bad we are. So we run from any little, if something crops up in our awareness, in our feeling body, in our interaction with our friends, and it exposes something that's uncomfortable, we blame ourselves first. And so we tend to run away from our own judgment of ourselves in these experiences. Well, the shaking that Mother Earth is doing and Saraswati was doing is about allowing these stories to come up. And as we've worked with those stories, we've learned to sit with them, embrace them, and steward them like little children needing the education and evolution that your parental part of your consciousness can now apply to them because they've been so involved in the story and the belief system and impugning yourself with how bad you are from those visitations of the stories and the emotions. By stewarding them and adding the evolution, adding the context in a much greater realm, the innocence returns because of the clear seeing. So the innocence and forgiveness is like immediate. So it taught us, over the years that we've been doing this, it taught us that your stories and emotions and the belief systems that arise in these events that happen, repeating events that happen, they're for us to embrace and take time out like a little child and give ourselves what's needed. Because I've demonstrated now that we are the infinite collection of paradox in separation. So unconsciousness separates the dualities. And the dualities in separation, one goes to yin and one goes to yang. So while they're in this dynamic opposition from unconsciousness, they fight and they compete for dominance. My way is right, no, my way is right. But when you're compassionate and mature, they're like little kids. Why are you guys fighting in the same sandbox over something so silly? That's just a doll. Anyway, seeing through the story is important, especially now. Mother Earth says she's shaking the foundation. All the stories that were latent in the closet that you thought you had dealt with from so many different angles already, perhaps are re-arising. I know for me, something unusual happened in the month. And I never suspected this, but my left leg started going, my hamstrings were so tight, and I was doing all my stretching, all my exercises and so on, but my hamstrings were exceptionally tight. And it was painful. Not real painful, but painful enough that I was, constantly doing stretching exercises. And then all of a sudden my left foot, the ball of it, started going numb. I'm like, what is this? And it all started tingling. I'm going, what is all? Well, I happened to be doing a session with Michael, who's not here tonight. And on his LifeWay machine, he was sending me metta healing through the machine. And I was telling I got this unusual thing happening. My foot is tingling and my bottom of my the ball of my foot is going numb. And so he goes, we can work on it through the metta. And so we did. And as I was in meditation, I like to stay in quantum when I'm doing any kind of healing and stuff. So as he's doing that, I'm going, oh wow, the issue popped up. And I'm going, oh my gosh. It was neglect, abandonment, betrayal, but more importantly, abuse of the female, and neglect of the female. And I went, holy moly, that's amazing. And it fits my template. And I have worked from so many different angles on this material, but I did not know this was still latent inside, and the shaking from Saraswati and Mother Earth brought something up. I thought that would be very important for you to hear on it, because right now I really appreciate if you if you subscribe to Hair in the Moon Astrology, the 5D report. It's really good on Facebook. Anyway, she's really good. I really like her material. Anyway, she uses these. She finds these obscure quotes and starts it off with these obscure quotes. And this obscure quote that she had this time for this, I think it was this week, sometime this week, said, The things you are letting go of have claw marks on them. And, we're in the South Node right now, so all kinds of stuff is being brought up from our deepest inner recesses. Yes, go ahead.
Can I address the female-male thing a minute?
Yes.
2 nights ago, I had this dream that went on, seemed like endlessly, and I kept intersecting and having lucid moments, but then, going back into the story of it. But the whole thing was really about the imbalance of the male and how that process has been so abusive to the earth. And I was worn out when I woke up, because it was just one story after another, which really showed the torturous behavior that has been to the earth. And I, it was, then I'm thinking, okay, so what about that is me, because, everything is you, right?
Yes.
So, I'm still kind of processing and integrating that concept of, like, where am I, out of balance between male and female. But I also feel like because I'm so sensitive to the Earth's consciousness that I was seeing something that's working its way out, like almost like oozing up to come out and be processed by us all on the Earth.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you for bringing that up. Let me relate back to my own issue because I want to tie, and this may be helpful for you and tie yourself to this. So when I was seeing that, this that I was experiencing was the neglect of the female and my background is my father was really, really rigid and controlling and disciplinarian and such. You guys already know all of that stuff. So I went on the female route. I became practically female, and I appreciate the path that I went. So part of what, when this was coming up, there's this little bit of, quandary that arises. Wait a minute, I spent a lot of time in the female, I own that. But no, the thing here that's important to see is that because at that point, when I was experiencing the abandonment and the abuse and the neglect of the female, who was neglecting who? So the outside characters are to reflect to us what we're not doing for ourselves, right? So immediately, the quandary is dissipated and the forgiveness is instant because the clear seeing is so bright, right? So I could see, oh yes, well, I was looking for, in that young age, I was looking for the validation of the female in so many different ways, not recognizing the fact that I needed it to come from me, the most valid point. So I was chasing it externally until, I could see that I needed it from me. So we're all a fractal of the one consciousness. And so in the one consciousness, the slogan, physician, heal thyself, by knowing thyself, is really appropriate. So when we see that the actors are the ones that are demonstrating to us, and we chase the actors to give us the validation until we realize, oh, I need to self-steward the integration and the appreciation rather than the dichotomy. So in my earliest stages, I didn't realize I was being male by not recognizing and appreciating my female side, even though I was chasing it. My own problem. So Was that a question, or are you just flipping? Oh, okay. So anyway, you can see how then it ties to the relevance of what we see coming out now in so many different ways, and we're about to take this journey tonight. I thought last time I got to lay down a whole lot of groundwork. Oh my God. Tonight, you guys are in for an adventure.
Good thing I'm going on vacation.
I know. I'm gonna have a mouth. I'm gonna have a head full, a heart full.
What happened to your leg? Did it, as soon as you realized that, did it go back to normal?
Not as soon as I realized it, but as soon as I really took time to integrate it. It started going back to normal. The what do you call it? The piriformis and the sciatic nerve and all that. It just really. I went, whoa, that's pretty good. It's not outside of you. It's inside of you.
Still flaring though. So.
Yeah, I still, because there's still some swelling between where the nerve is being pinched, but the tingling has stopped and more feeling has started on its way, and the piriformis feels normal now. I was stretching that doggone thing.
So that is a motion stuck in your body. Right?
Yes, yes. So when Saraswati and Mother Earth, they laid down all that groundwork to give you a good idea, and I highly recommend anybody watch the June 14th video where they go into the structure and substructure, because it's really beautiful to acknowledge how much and how vast you are, because when you can see yourself, your true self, this is not you, this is yours, this body thing is yours, but it is not you, just like the Taoist training that I shared with you guys in the 2-day workshop. So it's yours, but it's not you. So seeing what the true self, the capital self, capital S self, the one self. And that's where we're going tonight, is seeing closer to the capital self. And by dialoguing about the revisitation of all of this that's coming, because the foundations are being shaken. Remember, Mother Earth was talking about, and Saraswati was talking about, I'm shaking these things so that you can let go of them, because we're here to reestablish the connections you already have but you've forgotten. So we're re-stimulating your connection to your love for you and all things. Unconditional love is you. That's what you're born and made of. But we've habitualized our stories and the emotions that go with those stories into belief systems, and we let our tyrant run those things and keep us in the hamster wheel of duty, obligation, and self-sacrifice. So what they shared was really important to see and know. They're shaking all the foundations so that the new template can be made up, so long as you can co-create by not making a story about what's coming up. Let it come up. Of course, any issues that come up that need your stewarding, need your love, so that you can disentangle the entanglement and return it to superposition. That's important. Just like what happened with me. I allowed myself to move into the quantum, which is, I didn't bring the sheet, the flipboard today. Remember the Taoist training? The mind and thoughts are not yours, are not you, but they are yours. The emotions are not you, but yours. Your body and sensations are not you, but they're yours. When you can go beyond the mind, beyond the body, beyond the emotions, there you'll find the true self. So, and in the Taoist training, as I shared with you, we were taught to first bring the mind and thoughts to the breathing brings you into natural rhythm with the body, and the natural rhythm of the body brings you through the brainwave states. So you move into quantum. Once you could do it with your mind and thoughts, then they had you embrace your emotions, embrace the body sensations, and take all three, mind, thoughts, emotions, and body sensations, into the quantum. For what? So you can exchange them from the false self, because the mind, thoughts, emotions, and the belief systems and body sensations, they are yours, but they are not you. They are part of the false self, false sense of self. So if you take them into the quantum, then you can exchange them for the quantum you, the capital self. And that's where we're going tonight, is deep into the quantum self. Now that we've shaken the foundation, in the last video, we had the opportunity to go over the great depths of the sacred geometry of you that spans all the dualities, creating harmonized paradox. All those foundations, structure and substructure, so that you can own them all. You can see them all. And in seeing them all, you get a greater view, greater expanse of who and what you really are. And I think, here he goes. He's starting with the, the graphics. The show starts now. So, remember in this balloon metaphor of Purusha and Prakriti, Purusha being the summation of all paradoxes, which paradox has two equal parts, two dualities. So Purusha, the harmonized equal opposites, and because yin knows where yang is, yang knows yin, and that's home, then they exist in nothingness. But in separation consciousness, unconsciousness, there's nothing to hold the bridge together of the dualities. So the dualities that are split, they don't have a home. And that's one of the big problems. The home is right here. This point between Purusha and Prakriti that I've outlined as the eye of the needle and the diamond inside of the eye of the needle is where you remember, back a number of these nights ago, evening sessions, I brought out this diagram that showed the XYZ axis. So we have X, Y, and Z here, but they're also representative of the split of the dualities, yin and yang. One's in consciousness, one's in unconsciousness. And that the moving inward, the seventh direction, these are 6 directions here, the seventh direction is moving back inwards, is about locating the very eye of the needle, center of the diamond, where all the dualities, these are the dualities, split. They sit at the control room. Your control room is right here in the very center of your heart. And it's by returning home to the heart. We've shared so many times now about the process we have experienced as a child. As a child, we had a very open emotional body and very open mental body. But as we experienced trauma, abuse, pain, fear, suffering, and such, we started contracting this body and expanding this body. And so now we're at the process of returning to the center point inside of the heart to open back up the emotional body. Instead of just thinking about feelings, we're feeling our feelings. And it's so important because the center of the diamond right here is the throne room. The very infinitesimally small point is where the crossroads of all dualities exist. And it requires your consciousness to be centered in the heart, vulnerable, grounded, clear seeing. And in that way, you hold the reins again of your own golden chariot in the center of the heart. Now, this is where I want to go, deep inside of here. And I think you remember me talking about the Sacred Heart and the... in the Sacred Heart, you have the wreath of thorns. A number of nights, evening sessions ago, we went over the wreath of thorns, and the wreath of thorns being that the heart is like the sun in that it has to work with the 5 elements and the 4 states of matter, and it's not perfect. There's holes in it. Thus, in the sun, we see the holes in the sun. It's not perfect, and so it's these pathways that allow the diamond bridges of the dualities to come back. However, they're very painful because of the emotions that we suffered, the painful traumatic conditions that we suffered as a child, and polarized them. So I shared with you in that evening session, I talked about my Waterloo experience, about how revisiting the worst of my worst conditions and having to be suspended on the cross, not go anywhere. You can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, but accept. Accept in the revisiting of the old wounds, and in revisiting and accepting them, you get to transform them, see them in a different light. And so by me seeing them in that different light, I was able to then transform my dad, my brother, and the whole room and house. So you disassemble the whole crib. All right, that's really important to see, in so much that the diamond radiant lines that connect these bridges of dualities ah, yes. Now, in seeing that this metaphor of Purusha and Prakriti residing right in the center of the heart and dealing with the polarizations to the dualities enables you then to disassemble the cages or the bars of your own inner prison inside of your emotional body and psychological body. By disassembling and finding the truth, your father never was really against you. You polarized your father in that situation, and he played it out for you. And it's huge to try to take that responsibility. You change the dynamic, because the prism inside you that caused the entanglement, you're ready to wake up and maturely look at the situation and depolarize it. So you disassemble the old story and the belief system. Okay? Now, as that starts to happen, as you start to get success with that, eventually something happens that's kind of profound. And the only way I can explain it is that a shift begins to happen. A shift in awareness that is very similar to simultaneous consciousness from more than one perspective. And this happened unexpectedly. It happened after the last channeling 3-day workshop that Lisa was giving. And I wrote an article because all 7 happened. 7 different simultaneity of consciousness occurred. But more specifically, something new started happening. And that is, I've contextualized in these evening sessions so far as Purusha and Prakriti being like the balloon, the great balloon of the all. And so in that balloon, I've always drawn it just like if you took a balloon and twisted it at the center, and you have the 2 parts. And that models consciousness. I do, but I've done it so many times. You guys are bored of it. So I've always contextualized it almost like a figure 8. However, one could also draw it this way. Purusha, Prakriti. Prakriti, void and unconsciousness, existing inside of Purusha. Both are correct. Just different ways of modeling it. Different ways of understanding and communicating about it. And so, if we use this drawing here as as Prakriti, or void, or unconsciousness, then through staging, breaking through our layers of unconsciousness, then we start to get to the point where we can take the whole of paradox to be visited on us in all of our structure, in what we see about who and what we really and truly are. So as we get done with this duality perspective, understanding that this is the key, right here, the center point, the heart, in bridging, harmonizing, integrating these 2 to come together. So we get out of a lot of polarized dynamics. We no longer treat things as just good and bad. We start to embrace from a larger perspective, like a parent with 2 children that are at odds with each other. So the parent has a much bigger view and wants both of the kids to evolve and to be self-empowered. So there comes a point that as you're working with yourself through the dualities, through the stories, through the belief systems and the emotions, and you're working through the dualistic, polarized view of these things, bringing them all back into integration, well, then duality can find a way to come home. So there's no stimulation out here or in the many branches of this. You've worked through enough of the dynamic, polarized, dualistic dynamic, that a change starts to occur. You no longer look at things in the good-bad scenario. You look at them from non-dualistic. And you see, there's a real good reason why this is happening. So, in our growth, it's typical that we take our lead from those we admire and uphold the values and principles that we hold dearest. And as we see modeled in those beings' lives, the beauty and the characteristics that we want to see employed into our life, we grow. There comes a point, like a child going through grade school, then into college, and then eventually into the world, and then comes a point in time where that person stands away from working for anybody else, but takes on the liability and responsibility and authority of creating your own. And so, in that case, when we look at the fact that there is only one consciousness, and that one consciousness, as we shared before, is fully fractal and holographic. Each of us, then, is just as much that one consciousness. And so it becomes an important observation that in time, the evolution of the individual moves from external objects and principles and examples of evolution to one that's internal. And what I'm talking specifically about is your authority and your empowerment comes from you, comes from source, not from any individual. And so we have contextualized ourselves for a long time based upon our relationships, colloquially, where we stand in those relationships, in our jobs and in our the country and the politics, and you knew I was going to go there. Well,
Right, Harry?
there comes a point where one has to evaluate all the stratas that you're engaged in and have been engaged in, and where you find support and validation within. And ask the question, who are you, what are you, without? And so part of the shaking that Mother Earth was talking about and Saraswati was talking about is coming to a point where you may see it challenging you in different areas of your life, and in the reality, and even in the politic. Ultimately, it's all really, really good, in so much that when you find your relationship with Source, then that Source is responsible for you. You and that Source are one. And that's where we're going. So, in breaking down the dynamics of polarity in duality, we start to overcome, we start to transcend good-bad. Because you're moving to another level, you will never do those old behavior patterns that would have you hurt yourself or hurt other people. Because you know what it feels like. You've been there too long. It's too painful. You feel it. Probably more so than whoever you would possibly unintentionally hurt. So, as this dynamic changes, the polarity of duality, these start integrating and you start changing. Your view becomes much bigger. You've outgrown the old duality and polarity conflict. So what happened? You move into a greater sense of peace, stability, connection with your source. And in that source, you're not chasing anything externally. Validation, looking for validation, looking for anything external. You found it all inside of you. So your pathway is changing. So what happens is a larger view starts to change. It's the 45 and 90 degree shift starts to happen. And that 45 and 90 degree shift changes you from what was once this dynamic of duality to now you're much bigger. Let's say your head's over here, you're like a parent, and you're like, oh, poor polarized things, come on. It's you. You're calling all your polarized parts back home. All things in dissociation. You found right here. They need to come back here so that their dualities can merge. The bridge of compassionate appreciation. Conscious compassion, appreciation for the duality. So you start bringing them, you know they're not external anymore. All of your conditions. Have you ever noticed when you were ready to confront an issue with somebody else, owning your part, the dynamic completely changed and you didn't have to go and talk to that individual or go through what you thought was going to be an enormous encounter?
Sometimes.
True, it's still a test. It's still a test. True, true. Sometimes I still want to I want it perfect all the time. I don't want to have to get out of bed. So I'm pointing out that a shift begins to happen. Something inside you moves to another level where you're observing. You're more rooting into the observer, and the observer almost like has its arms around the two poles, the male or female, the duality, polarity, conflict. And you know inside of that body are dissociative components of yourself that are ready to be seen and to be stewarded back to the heart. So the issue, the power of the charge, keeping them in unconscious competition and fighting, changes. There's no more charge of competition and fighting, so they come home. Compassionate appreciation starts the bridge arises. And then the two components start coming together, all because your consciousness is ready to invite them back home. So a shift in consciousness begins to turn, and you start feeling you remember yourself, you're active in your awareness, in your polarized consciousness, because yes, you have a foothold there, you got roots, you know what it's like intimately, but you also know the observer part, and you can hold that duality in your love body, your emotional body, without polarizing it. Come on, kids. Come on, kids. A little closer. You're doing good. You're doing good. Come on back. Oh, that's what I want to see. And you steward the dissociated components of yourself, because you are the bridge of all dualities. Right there at the eye of the needle, inside of the diamond, or all the diamond diagonal pathways connecting all dualities. That's how powerful the throne inside of the heart is. So, this shift begins occurring, and it's very some would call it Fibonacci, but I would say it's kind of phi, P-H-I, phi spiral. We move in a phi spiral manner in this 90-degree or 45 and 45. We start shifting our consciousness. And part of the shift is we start moving from, let's say, this is our orientation, straight up and perpendicular. Well, if you were to map that, it would be like this, a waveform. So you would have a wave up, so we can call that yang and yin. So we have this process of spiraling that takes place in our consciousness that partially goes 45, yang, 90, and then it starts going yin, yin. So it gets the whole pole, both polarities. Yes.
I felt that before.
Yes.
I never knew what it was.
Yes.
It's like this slow spinning.
So remember in the last one, you gave me goosebumps. Remember in the last one, last evening's session, I was talking about Saraswati. Showing her with all the arms with, remember I talked about Pleiadian
Party in Paradise.
Party in Paradise.
1998.
1998. Okay, I was a little bit wrong. I couldn't remember exactly where it was. Well, when we were in Bali, she appeared and she showed me her dance and how she's connected to all the geometries that create this manifested creation. So I was in meditation when I had that 90-degree shift, and I'm going, wow, I'm really in my observer, and I feel like I'm stewarding, my two dualities. And so I asked Saraswati, how come you got so, hey girl, how come you got so many arms, man? She's really kind. And this is what she showed me. She showed me her arms are the various orchestrations of the evolution from one layer and level to the next, expanding out over all of creation. She exists on all those levels. So her many arms are about, holding those in all those different forms.
And it's the fractals.
Yes. Yes. All the orchestrations. So she shared with me that. I'm going, oh my God. She goes, yeah, I want you to share this with the class. And I'm going, no, that's a lot. Okay, so you remember we went over even the spider and how these are representatives of here we go, a sphere and a polar graph, and how the polar graph is essential for assisting in demonstrating all the sacred geometry. Now, one thing I didn't share with you is, I got it. This is a sphere, and so the beauty of the structure and substructure that exists in our being is it doesn't matter what size sphere you have, you can delineate from binary, octal, hexadecimal. You can go half space. You can go any diminution you want within any sphere. So any atom holds infinite size, right? So the template that you exist on depends on how deeply you want to look. If you can see it, it is there. And that was the beauty of sacred geometry, which sacred geometry taught me. It's ubiquitous. Between two dualities, there is so many connections that they cannot be lost. They can only be unconsciously separated, or separated by virtue of the unconscious observer. So when you go conscious, meaning you remember, you're connected to all things, it starts a magnetism, turning those horseshoe magnets from opposition towards attraction. You're calling them back home. That's why we're bringing this up inside of the heart, is to begin to see that even you, remember all these beings that we know of on all these different levels, they are you. But you forgot. There's only one being. And so we've taken the fractal of unconsciousness. We forgot who we were. We've identified ourselves. In this separation reality, according to our history, personality, and experience. So it's false. All of it's false. It started off false. And so by remembering, we're starting to reconnect who and what you are. And this is really important because you believed, just like I believed, I was all of my faults. My faults are mine, but they are not who I am. You were born somewhere else. And that was in infinite creation, non-dualistically, non-polar, polarized. And so, just as you raise a child out of the good-bad scenario, you got to raise yourself to see what was it for. What was it all for? It made you conscious. And it wounded you so much by doing unconscious things that now if you try to do unconscious things, that wound hurts. It hurts in other people. It hurts other people. And when it hurts other people, it hurts you even more. You can't hurt other people because of what you've been through. So there's your trophy. It gave you something that you can't go beyond. Now in consciousness, you have loving compassion for all those people you may have hurt, but now we're trying to turn that loving compassion back on you. We want to re-identify you with all the love that you've unconsciously pushed aside because you've identified with all of your faults, your beliefs, and the emotions that go with those. So, where I want to take you is to the sea. Everybody know what an urchin is? This is a sea urchin, and I got these off of royalty-free pixabay.com. Anyway, about a year ago, I started having these experiences in the quantum, and they were showing me a sea urchin. I'm like, what?
Sushi time!
What? Oh my God, yeah.
You like it?
Yeah, uni. So it took me a while to really get this. So it took me a while to get the sea urchin metaphor that they were trying to show me. I knew it was really deep, but I didn't know how to really get it. So, have you guys heard of a Planck hole? You know what a black hole is, right? Have you heard of a Planck hole? Planck hole is a black hole, but it's the smallest of the black holes. Okay? In a Planck hole, you can see that whatever goes down inside of the black hole is not lost. The scientists theorize that whatever existed, whatever drama has taken place is never lost. As it goes down the black hole and it goes through the singularity, in the core of the black hole, there is an extrusion of energy, and the extrusion of energy happens to be what they call Planck hair. And Planck hair, if you can imagine a sphere with little fibers coming off them in all directions. That is a Planck sphere. Planck hair. And the Planck hair is filled with all of the information of everything that occurred. Okay? So in the sea urchin, I was finding when they were demonstrating to me, it was way down in the center of the heart, and I'm going, what do you mean there's a sea urchin in the center of the heart? Little did I know they were talking about the Planck hole. So the Planck hole, if you see the sea urchin, the sea urchin is a great metaphor for the Planck hole in that it has all of these fibers coming off of it, but you've got to take two of these sea urchins and put them bottom to bottom. Then you get two torus fields coming together. And so they represent more of a complete sphere. Otherwise it's like a half sphere, a hemisphere, right? And so what they theorize is that out of these projection strands of information, you get these overlays, right? Torus fields upon torus fields. And what's projected on those screens is those information.
Interstellar.
Pretty cool. Yes, very much interstellar. But if any of you have seen The Matrix, and remember when Neo finally gets to see the architect, and he goes into that room, and that room is almost like the inside shell of one of these, and it's TV upon TV upon TV, you know, fractalizations of TV screens in an array that's very much like the inside of a torus or inside of the sea urchin. So the architect sits inside of all of these orchestrations of all the information. So when Neo shows up, you know, you see Neo going there, except when Neo got mad. And then he didn't like the architect and didn't like the architect's answer. And so you could see all the disarrays, all the, what would you call that? Probability lines that Neo had for his rage and outrage playing out on all the screens. Very interesting. So if we take that metaphor of the double sea urchin, you get something like this. And this is from the website uvs-model.com. And I used one of their graphics. But this is showing the Earth, but if you can just imagine that as being the core of the Planck sphere, and then it radiating out the information on all these different bands. And so there's a crop circle, and this is Avebury 2000, courtesy of the crop circle connector, and the photos by Frank Lauman. But it's showing basically the same thing. So this would be, if we were oriented, this would be here, and there's two different poles. And this would be the core, and I guess one would be the ion chute, and one would be the proton chute. So this is really important in helping us to see, like I was just talking about, when you start working with the dualities, your own stories and beliefs, and you work through the stages, the cages, you start to see deeper into yourself and into creation, into reality, true reality, because you're not polarized. Polarized leaves you looking at a world based on good and bad. But in unicity, in non-duality, they come together and they show, it's like the Jacob's ladder. Jacob's ladder is like walking up the different rungs of the spine with the kundalini rising up that opens up your awareness to the point where, you know, you're observer, you're the character, and you're the source. And this is where we're going. So, seeing this heart torus and knowing that at the very center of our heart is like a Planck sphere radiating out our entanglements. And as we work through our entanglements, polarized, dualistic belief systems, as we work through them, we expand to another level of seeing ourselves. And that has these 90-degree shifts or 45-degree shifts where you expand out and start seeing more and more of the reality. But the important part is you get closer to the heart space, to the diamond in the heart, in the eye of the needle. And as you get inside of that torus point here, you get this image here. This is from www.etherforce.com. And this is by Gisbert Nihugis. Very beautiful graphic display. This is very much like the sea urchin. But at our core, and see you have the, like Purusha and Prakriti. But as you evolve, you get a greater expanse. You get to greater, you start seeing into yourself even more, and you start abiding more in the center, right here. Right in this point. So this consciousness is very much like our heart with our lungs around it, and our eye is up here. Which, if we looked at the galaxy, our heart is at the very center of the galaxy. And for me, I go to power spots quite a lot, and some of the power spots are attributed to different phenomena. Like some are very earth-oriented, allow you to go deep into the earth. Some of them are more celestial, so they take you out into, you know, the cosmos. And there's this one that I go to, it's universal. And when I go there, it's like, as you meditate, you experience sitting at the center of the galaxy. And it's so peaceful and calm, and the view is just amazing. And I attribute that to just like the toroidal fields. And as we move into the integrative part, because here's the separative part of the galactic energy, as it moves into the integrative part, as these come back together, there are so many lines of consciousness that it creates an eye, and the eye sees in all direction. So the experience of sitting in some of these power spots has you feel like you're sitting in this great peace that has a universal or a galactic kind of a view. And that's helpful in looking at ourselves from a more galactic point of view. This is what I was talking about, the separative energy pattern of the torus into the integrative pole, and here's the eye. And I drew this diagram years ago, 2009. I'm talking about, once again, those different angles of changes of seeing the observer self. Well, the observer self becomes one of the most helpful aspects in moving inside of the quantum and reviewing everything that comes out. As I said earlier in this, in our Taoist training, we went first taking the mind and the thoughts into the quantum. Then we took then we practiced taking the emotions and the body sensations along with the thoughts and the mind into the quantum. Well, at some point, what they wanted us to do was move into these different postures and do the same thing. And then they put us into hard postures so that anything that was residing inside of our physiological structure would come up emotionally or psychologically, and we could take all of that into the quantum and exchange it for who and what you really are. And you start rooting into that. Well, that's the observer self. That's moving into the observer self. And so as I said that earlier, these experiences are coming more quickly now of moving into multiple perspectives of consciousness. So you're the character, but you're also the observer. And what's most recently come is also the experience of source. There is a part of each and every one of us, as I said, we all come from one consciousness. And the source of that one consciousness seems like if you were to throw a rock into a still pond and watch the ripples, how beautiful and fluid that would be, and symmetrical. Well, if you were to do that in all directions and have waves coming in all directions, the source of consciousness is very much like that. Operate. If you ever seen Interstellar, they used a cube and they showed all the probabilities. Well, as we allow the I was going to go much deeper into the lecture, but I'm running out of time. As we go deeper into the source, it's very much like this, in all directions. Our sun is a good metaphor for the source of consciousness in our local vicinity. So we have a source, and that's right here. We have the observer, which is very much like being on any one of these, but observing from all. The whole, if this is the movie screen, the whole torus is the screen. Your observer self is like that. As you work with this non-duality and work through these issues, the observer, you're experiencing yourself as the individual, but the character, but also all the way around as the observer, and at the same time, you're the source. And the source is at the very center, but it's very fluid, and it's like this. This is like the source of all consciousness. And I kind of drew it many, many, many years ago.
That's like holographic.
Yes, yes. And this obviously doesn't look spherical, but it's simulating the sphericalness. All right, so I drew this quite a while ago, trying to emphasize the what do you call it? The sea urchin shell, the half toruses, in a galactic kind of a view. But if we took all the angles, this is the eye, the one eye, the source of consciousness. And so, lastly, I pointed out how the diamond in the heart, the center between Purusha and Prakriti, exists right in the diamond in the heart or inside of the eye of the needle. Well, to show you how big you are, if this is Purusha and Prakriti, this is out of Nature magazine. Does everybody recognize this? No? In astronomy, they were able to capture the vast array of all the galaxies. And so they're demonstrating it in two different forms. They're demonstrating it spherically. So the dispersion pattern went out in all directions. And this 3D model, they're demonstrating on a 2D map, so they got the sphere, okay? So the dispersion pattern on a two-dimensional graphic shows it in a sphere. Well, they call this Laniakea in astronomical terms, Laniakea and Perseus Pisces. Again, this is from same website. So here's the spread. And so of course, depends on what angle that you're looking at it. So somewhere in here is the center of all this. This is you, the center. But it really drives it home when you look at this. The original bang. The dispersion pattern inside of this universe.
Dual. That's the pattern right there.
As above, so below. And so, we're here parenting ourselves, not just as the human, but we spread out. According to Lisa's work, we spread out into all of the races, terrestrially and extraterrestrially.
Kind of looks like a butterfly.
So all the probability, yes, some people have been seeing the great butterfly, and there's a crop circle with the butterfly effect. It is, and we are, and all the hands. This is us. As we're getting our grok around who and what we really are. We exist everywhere in this area. So anyway, as we work with those dualities, I just wanted to re-emphasize, as you work with the dualities and you reparent them into non-duality, then the boundaries, the layers and layers of boundaries start to dissipate. Just like in what I shared about the Waterloo experience, the crib disappears. Your crib of evolution dissolves because it's all consciousness. Its structure is dependent on how much you're in opposition to unconsciousness. When you accept your unconsciousness and learn from your unconsciousness, you no longer polarize it and you use it to flower the evolution of you on all spectrums. So you are every star and grain of sand, and we just forgot. And so we're going to take a break, and then we're going to do a meditation. They have a nice lineup for tonight. So, any questions? No? Okay. So take a break, about 5 minutes. To your meditation posture. We're about to do a meditation / channeling. And I need to share with you that you're going to hear 4 different pieces of music. And these pieces of music are specifically chosen to first be slightly jarring. Allow that jarring to be the continuity between the last evening session and this session, meaning that allow the music, allow yourself to relax and invite the music to begin to vibrate your structure and substructure. And we're going to go through 3 different phases of that shaking. Each one taking us deeper and more expansive. And you will see as you go through the transitions, the open space, the release, the stillness becomes so expansive and at the same time so clearing that you are more able to receive in the last sections the absolute nurturing of unconditional, universal love of yourself to yourself from all, the great all one. And so let's begin by taking a few breaths, centering yourself, bringing yourself fully into the here and now, and taking the steps necessary, transitioning mind, emotion, body sensations through the brainwave states towards the ever-present, ever-accepting, ever-nurturing quantum. And so from here we begin. Good evening. This is Mother Earth. It is an honor this evening to share my energies with you and your consciousness, your beingness into my heart. Invite the focus of your heart into deeper surrender. sense of vulnerability, to permeate your chest, heart. Allow surrender. Like a ripple in an infinite pond. Slowly opening the emotional body. To the fluid continuum of my unconditional love. Let the vibrations of my consciousness and love merge with this music gently, shaking, vibrating the various structure and substructure of your infinite being. And that being, fiber and filament of feelings, allow the unconsciousness in the various stratas of your being to rise through the fluid, through your being and consciousness. As you remain attentive to release and surrender. With your feelings, extend your ability to sense. Feel me, my golden essence, permeating where you chance to open the sensation of your heartfelt connection to all things around you. Allow the release of your magnificent infinite body, letting go of the templates of polarized consciousness. All that represents to you. Let the ripples relieve your grip upon them. And extend now from the earth body into the solar system and galactic. For the earth body is merely a boundary operated by conscious attention. And in this moment, then, release the boundary of the earth body, earth being, and integrate that of the solar and galactic, inviting the pathways by remaining centered, like at the center of the torus, and inviting more of the toroidal lines representing the expansiveness of your being. Past the earth body, the emotional fibers and filaments of feeling, embrace the who you are, occupying the solar and galactic. Allow the music resonating many stages of your infrastructure to release the drama or trauma, the fears that exist in the various stratas of your feeling body. Invite then the great cosmic and galactic love and as you breathe in that pure loving essence, allow your being to saturate letting go of the empty spaces in between the layers, structure and substructure. Cleansing, relaxing the grip that identifies you with such incompletely processed points of view, with that of the fullness of the quantum. Embracing you. As the loving energy of this quantum clears the distraction, the illusion of incomplete processing. Feel the radiance replacing what you once gripped and identified as self. From such polarized view, let all but that diamond clear energy of the quantum consciousness infuse into every aspect. And now surrender even further. And from the heart, seek the inner diamond. And journey towards that brightness. Seek to go deeper into that jewel. Observe the stillness now. And how much you've released, clarifying the fields before you, enabling the experience of the observer. And you, the character, and the source, deep in the brightness, in the center of your being. Let that experience expand. For we are bringing out the quantum fluidity to heighten your reconnection with Source, Observer, Self. Surrender. Allow us to re-stimulate the pathway through this quantum embrace of absolute unconditional love, heightening your perception, your clarity, your stillness, to feel the Trinity of perception, allow you now in silence to explore the stillness and the movements within the stillness. From the feeling body, the heart, the core of creation, the core of consciousness. Let all boundaries dissolve. Slowly now, assisting in your regrounding. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.